Today, I show you the exact dinner food and simple evening routine that can help support much clearer, more confident night vision for anyone over the age of 60. Struggling to see clearly in dim light or feeling deeply anxious when driving after the sun quietly goes down is a highly common and deeply frustrating problem that creates a lot of quiet, persistent uncertainty about your changing personal independence. Your eye doctor might have briefly suggested simply avoiding night driving altogether, or told you that losing your low-light vision is just an unavoidable, normal part of getting older, which is often incomplete and not fully helpful information for safely maintaining your daily freedom. Over my many years of closely helping older adults naturally protect their aging eyes, I have seen highly practical, gentle, and effective ways to properly support the delicate internal structures responsible for your crucial evening sight. 1. The 6 p.m. dim-down transition. Deliberately soften and drastically dim your harsh overhead dining room and bright kitchen lights at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, completely replacing glaring ceiling bulbs with much warmer, lower-intensity ambient lighting just before you calmly sit down to eat your meal. This highly intentional, deeply physical environmental shift gently allows the tiny, highly sensitive light-gathering cells located in the very back of your aging eyes to smoothly and properly prepare for the fast-approaching darkness without experiencing any sudden, disorienting, and physically painful visual shock. I remember a woman named Susan, who was 64 years old, always eating her late evening meals directly under incredibly bright, intensely fluorescent kitchen lights that heavily illuminated every single sharp corner of her large room. She would then immediately step outside into the pitch-black neighborhood to walk her small dog and find herself completely unable to see the concrete sidewalk safely for several long, deeply confusing minutes because her unadjusted eyes were entirely overwhelmed by the sudden, massive change in light. We simply replaced her main evening lighting with a single, warm-toned, gentle table lamp during her quiet dinner, completely allowing her aging eyes to gradually and safely transition into a comfortable low-light state long before she ever stepped out of her heavy front door. Her natural ability to see the dark, uneven pavement safely improved drastically, completely removing that highly fearful, deeply anxious period of temporary evening blindness that previously ruined her nightly walking routine. The human eye relies heavily on very specific, highly delicate microscopic proteins to safely and properly interpret visual information when the surrounding physical environment completely lacks adequate natural daytime sunlight or strong artificial room light. As adults naturally age past 60, these vital, deeply internal proteins physically take a significantly longer amount of time to successfully rebuild and properly function after being forcefully exposed to intense, bright indoor household lighting for prolonged, uninterrupted evening periods. When you abruptly move your body from a brilliantly lit, modern kitchen directly into a completely dark evening environment, your internal visual system is temporarily, severely depleted and physically cannot gather enough remaining ambient light to successfully form a clear, reliable image, causing that dangerous, deeply frustrating feeling of profound temporary blindness. By intentionally lowering your surrounding household light levels well before you actually desperately need your vital night vision to safely function, you actively give your sluggish, aging eyes a highly generous essential head start to slowly regenerate these essential proteins without any sudden, stressful, or dangerous rush. Exactly 1 full hour before you actually plan to sit down and slowly eat your warm evening meal, consciously walk quietly through your main living spaces and firmly turn off any bright, overwhelming overhead ceiling lights or intense, cool-toned reading lamps that heavily flood the room with harsh glare. Switch on 1 or 2 small, strategically placed floor lamps or soft, gentle table lamps carefully fitted with warm, amber-colored bulbs, creating a deeply relaxing, highly subdued, and dimly lit atmosphere throughout your entire kitchen and dining area while you calmly prepare your food. Allow yourself to safely and peacefully eat your entire meal slowly in this gently softened environment actively avoiding the intense, deeply ingrained urge to suddenly turn on a bright, glaring overhead light just to clearly see the absolute minor details of your resting dinner plate. This helps support more comfortable, significantly steadier vision as your eyes naturally and safely adjust to the deeply dimming evening light. 2. The orange root and olive oil pairing. Eat a highly moderate, carefully prepared portion of soft, warmly roasted orange root vegetables like fresh sweet potatoes or firm carrots, specifically and intentionally combined directly with a high-quality, completely natural dietary fat during your quiet evening meal. Consistently combining these deeply colorful, naturally vibrant vegetables with a gentle, healthy cooking oil safely ensures that your aging, delicate digestive tract can actually extract and successfully absorb the specific, highly essential plant nutrients your eyes desperately need to physically support clear, low-light vision. I remember a man named Thomas, who was 71 years old, faithfully and stubbornly eating large, completely dry bowls of plain, heavily steamed carrots every single evening, deeply hoping it would magically stop the deeply frustrating glowing halos he constantly saw around neighborhood streetlights at night. He was incredibly disappointed and quietly angry when his night vision remained exactly the same, entirely unaware that without a highly necessary healthy fat source, his aging body was completely unable to absorb the specific vital protective compounds tightly hidden deep inside the tough vegetable fibers. We simply started tossing his evening sweet potatoes and chopped carrots in a small, highly conservative spoonful of rich, dark, extra virgin olive oil before slowly roasting them in his warm kitchen oven until they were perfectly soft. He found his new, gently oiled dinners much more satisfying, and the properly absorbed, highly targeted nutrients steadily provided the precise biological support his aging eyes actually required to confidently and safely handle dark evening roads. Deeply orange and brilliantly yellow natural root vegetables are highly packed with a highly specific, incredibly powerful plant compound that your incredible human body eventually converts completely into a crucial, life-sustaining vitamin strictly responsible for properly maintaining and actively repairing the delicate light-sensing cells resting quietly in your retina. However, this incredibly valuable, deeply vision-supporting nutrient is strictly and completely fat-soluble, naturally meaning it physically cannot be broken down, properly transported through your complex bloodstream, or successfully delivered to your highly vulnerable eye tissues without the direct, physical presence of a natural, healthy dietary fat. Many older adults completely and accidentally miss out on these powerful, deeply natural visual benefits because they heavily steam or fiercely boil their dinner vegetables completely plain, inadvertently starving their heavily aging eyes of the exact, precise protective nutrition they are trying so incredibly hard to carefully provide. Adding a highly gentle natural fat source acts exactly like a vital biological delivery vehicle, physically binding tightly to the crucial colored pigments directly in your stomach and carrying them safely and securely to the deep back of the eye where they physically build the essential proteins needed for clear, sharp night sight. Take one medium-sized, highly fresh sweet potato or two large, deeply firm orange carrots. Peel them carefully with a sharp tool and slice them precisely into small, highly manageable cubes that your aging teeth can comfortably, safely, and easily chew without unnecessary jaw strain. Place these beautiful, colorful cubes gently onto a flat metal baking sheet and intentionally drizzle exactly 1 single tablespoon of high-quality, natural extra virgin olive oil evenly over the entire vegetable batch, gently tossing the small pieces with your hands until every single cube is lightly but thoroughly coated. Roast them slowly and quietly in a moderately warm oven until they are incredibly soft, deeply tender, and easily pierced with a normal dining fork. Then calmly eat this highly specific, beautifully paired side dish alongside your normal, quiet evening dinner. This helps support more comfortable, significantly steadier vision by steadily and reliably nourishing the deep internal structures responsible for your nighttime sight. 3. The 2-day-a-week consistency rule. Intentionally and carefully serve this highly specific, properly paired orange root, vegetable, and healthy oil combination exactly twice a week for your standard evening meal. strictly avoiding the highly common, highly frustrating mistake of aggressively overeating it every single solitary day. Establishing a highly steady, deeply predictable, and completely moderate weekly rhythm gently provides your delicate, highly sensitive eyes with a constant, incredibly reliable supply of vital internal nutrition without heavily overwhelming your aging liver or stressing your quiet, sensitive digestive system. I remember a woman named Margaret, who was 67 years old, reading deeply about the incredible vision benefits of sweet potatoes, and immediately starting to eat massive, highly overwhelming portions of them every single night for several long, highly repetitive weeks on end. She quickly became deeply fatigued by the entirely repetitive, incredibly boring meals and eventually experienced mild but highly annoying digestive discomfort, gently leading her to stubbornly abandon the highly beneficial food altogether out of sheer, overwhelming frustration and sudden food burnout. We gently corrected her overly enthusiastic, highly intense approach, scaling her weekly intake safely and cleanly back to just two highly enjoyable, perfectly paired dinner portions spaced evenly and cleanly throughout her normal, quiet, highly predictable week. Her sensitive digestion naturally settled completely, and her delicate eyes gently continued to quietly receive the exact, deeply steady, and completely perfect level of nutritional support they truly needed to comfortably navigate the dark, incredibly challenging evening hours. When older adults deeply and passionately desire to naturally protect their vital aging vision, there is a very strong, highly understandable, and incredibly common temptation to consume massive, highly overwhelming quantities of a beneficial food or severely rely on highly concentrated, deeply artificial vitamin supplements in desperate hopes of a rapid, highly miraculous overnight fix. However, the complex human body uniquely and safely stores this highly specific, deeply fat-soluble plant compound deep within its natural internal tissues, meaning you absolutely do not need to constantly and forcefully flood your delicate system on a daily basis to safely achieve the deeply desired, incredibly protective visual effects. Consuming incredibly large, highly daily amounts of these deep, brightly orange vegetables can sometimes gently and safely tint the aging skin a mild, highly harmless yellow color, but it can also heavily burden the aging digestive tract with excessive, difficult to process, and highly bulky natural plant fiber. A deeply moderate, highly consistent, and widely spaced dietary approach safely ensures your highly delicate retina always has the exact, precise raw materials it desperately needs to carefully rebuild its sensitive nighttime light receptors without ever causing any unnecessary physical stress to the rest of your aging, beautiful body. Carefully look at your standard, familiar weekly calendar and intentionally choose two highly specific, completely non-consecutive evenings, such as a quiet, relaxing Tuesday and a deeply peaceful Friday, to deliberately include your cleanly roasted sweet potatoes or softly cooked, oiled carrots. On the other 5 quiet days of your normal standard week, completely and safely ignore this highly specific food and safely enjoy your regular, deeply varied daily diet without any lingering guilt or stressful, highly overwhelming worry about actively supporting your nighttime vision. Keep the prepared dinner portions highly reasonable, exactly and perfectly around 1/2 to 1 full measured cup of the safely cooked, soft vegetables per sitting, completely ensuring you feel perfectly satisfied, deeply nourished, but absolutely never uncomfortably full or heavily, painfully bloated before bedtime. This helps support more comfortable, significantly steadier vision by safely and carefully maintaining the perfect, highly consistent balance of natural ocular nutrition. 4. The evening screen, contrast adjustment. Lower the brightness and carefully adjust the contrast on your evening television and digital reading tablets to a deeply comfortable, much softer setting immediately after finishing your dinner, long before you ever plan to sleep. This highly practical, incredibly simple environmental adjustment safely prevents your delicate aging eyes from being violently struck by harsh, glaring blue light, which severely delays your natural ability to recover clear vision in completely dark rooms. By taking this deeply proactive step, You actively protect your sensitive light receptors from becoming completely exhausted by artificial illumination, gently allowing your vital evening vision to remain perfectly stable and highly reliable throughout the rest of your quiet night. I remember a man named William, who was 72 years old, constantly struggling to safely walk down his completely unlit hallway to his quiet bedroom after watching his favorite loud, incredibly bright evening television programs. He was staring directly into a massive, heavily illuminated screen set to its maximum, blinding brightness setting for hours, completely wiping out his natural night vision and leaving him completely disoriented in the dark. We simply reduced the harsh backlight setting on his large living room television and activated the warm color mode on his reading tablet exactly at sunset. His delicate eyes no longer felt violently shocked when he finally turned the bright screens off, completely allowing him to safely and easily see the dark hallway floor without any sudden fear of accidentally tripping. When you stare at a highly bright, intensely illuminated digital screen in a heavily dimmed living room, the tiny, highly sensitive pupils inside your aging eyes forcefully contract to completely block out the overwhelming, harsh glare of the electronic device. This perfectly normal physical reaction essentially tricks your delicate visual system into completely believing it is still the middle of a bright sunny afternoon, completely stopping the crucial, entirely natural nighttime adaptation process dead in its tracks. As soon as you finally click the bright screen off to safely go to sleep or step outside, your severely contracted pupils simply cannot open fast enough to let in the very low ambient light, leaving you feeling profoundly, deeply blind for several long, highly anxious minutes. Softening the harsh screen brightness naturally allows your eyes to safely stay deeply relaxed and appropriately dilated, keeping your highly sensitive nighttime vision perfectly intact and completely ready to function. Pick up your main television remote control or your digital reading tablet and intentionally locate the main display settings menu, specifically looking carefully for the brightness, backlight, or contrast controls exactly before you sit down for your quiet evening. Carefully and slowly lower the harsh brightness slider all the way down until the completely illuminated screen looks deeply soft, incredibly gentle, and perfectly matches the much lower ambient lighting of your quiet, highly comfortable living room environment without causing any unnecessary squinting. This completely helps support more comfortable, significantly steadier vision by safely and effectively protecting your deeply sensitive nighttime light receptors from unnecessary digital exhaustion right before you go to bed. 5. The warm post-dinner hydration habit. Drink one small, deeply comforting cup of completely caffeine-free, warmly heated herbal tea, or simply plain warm water roughly 30 full minutes after you completely finish eating your evening meal and your roasted orange root vegetables. Providing your highly complex aging body with this gentle, deeply soothing source of internal hydration directly supports the highly necessary overnight stabilization of your completely natural tear film, actively preventing the highly frustrating dry scattered light effect that beautifully causes massive halos around street lamps. This deeply intentional, perfectly timed evening fluid intake completely guarantees your highly sensitive ocular surface safely has the exact raw physical materials it desperately requires to remain perfectly smooth and heavily lubricated before you sleep. I remember a woman named Helen, who was 69 years old, deeply complaining that every single passing car headlight looked like a massive blinding starburst that completely covered her entire windshield during her short evening drives. She was drinking several tall glasses of highly caffeinated iced tea exactly with her dinner, which actively pulled essential moisture away from her sensitive tissues and left the protective surface of her delicate eyes incredibly dry and deeply textured. We carefully swapped her highly stimulating evening beverage to a single, small, highly warm cup of plain chamomile tea shortly after she completely finished eating her food. Her heavily aging eyes finally received the gentle hydration they desperately needed, and the terrifying, highly distracting halos around bright lights completely softened into clear, perfectly manageable points of highly safe illumination. The incredibly thin, highly delicate layer of watery tears completely covering the exact front of your aging eye acts strictly as the very first physical lens that incoming dark evening light must perfectly pass through before it ever reaches your sensitive retina. When your entire body is even slightly dehydrated at the completely exhausted end of a long, heavily busy day, this highly protective tear film physically breaks apart and rapidly becomes incredibly uneven, deeply dry, and severely rough across the sensitive surface of the entire eye. Any harsh, bright light safely coming from an oncoming car or a tall, heavily illuminated neighborhood street lamp hitting this dry, incredibly uneven surface will violently scatter in every single direction, completely causing those massive, deeply frustrating rings of glare that ruin your nighttime confidence. Drinking a small amount of warm, hydrating fluid gently replenishes your internal water reserves exactly when your deeply tired tear glands need the physical resources the absolute most to confidently build a stable viewing surface. Boil a small, highly fresh kettle of perfectly clean water exactly half an hour after you peacefully finish chewing your final bite of your safely roasted orange vegetables and your standard, highly quiet evening dinner. Pour the warm, deeply soothing water slowly over a simple, completely caffeine-free herbal tea bag, such as highly gentle chamomile or completely mild peppermint, or simply drink the warm water entirely plain from your favorite, highly comfortable ceramic mug while you quietly relax in your living room. This completely helps support more comfortable, significantly steadier vision by safely ensuring your highly natural tear film completely remains perfectly smooth, deeply lubricating, and entirely free of irritating dry spots that severely distort necessary evening light. 6. The dark room adaptation exercise. Sit completely quietly and deeply safely in a completely dark, highly familiar room exactly inside your home for exactly 5 full minutes before you ever attempt to gently start your heavy car engine for a required quiet evening drive. This highly intentional, deeply relaxing physical exercise actively allows the sluggish, heavily aging proteins deep inside your delicate retina to gently and completely regenerate in total, absolute peace, profoundly enhancing your natural ability to safely see dark, highly low-contrast objects on the neighborhood road. By intentionally forcing your eyes to deeply rest in total darkness, you are directly physically bypassing the highly anxious, terribly frustrating visual transition period that completely ruins your nighttime driving confidence and deeply held independence. I remember a man named Arthur, who was 74 years old, feeling an overwhelming, deeply profound sense of panic every single time he slowly backed his heavy car out of his dark driveway at night, because he absolutely could not see the dark edges of his own lawn. He was previously rushing directly from his brightly lit, heavily illuminated kitchen straight into his dark car, completely demanding his highly aging eyes to perfectly perform complex visual tasks before they had any physical chance to safely and quietly adapt. We simply asked him to quietly sit peacefully in his completely unlit, entirely dark living room chair for exactly 5 full minutes before he ever picked up his heavy car keys to safely leave the house. His delicate aging eyes gently adjusted completely to the deep shadows, entirely removing the terrifying, deeply anxious feeling of driving completely blind down his quiet, deeply familiar neighborhood street. A very recent, highly well-regarded observational clinical study beautifully focusing entirely on older adults clearly highlighted that the strict physical time safely required for the delicate human eye to successfully adapt to complete darkness increases dramatically and significantly as we naturally and safely age. The deeply specialized, highly microscopic night vision cells, gently resting completely in your retina, heavily rely on a specific, highly delicate protein that is instantly bleached and completely erased the exact second it is entirely exposed to normal, highly bright indoor household room lighting. When you forcefully demand your heavily aging eyes to immediately navigate a terribly dark road without giving this crucial protein adequate, completely uninterrupted time to physically rebuild completely in the shadows, you are essentially driving with a severely compromised, highly vulnerable visual system. Giving yourself a quiet, deeply calm period of total darkness manually triggers this highly essential biological rebuilding process without completely causing any unnecessary, highly dangerous physical stress or sudden, completely overwhelming visual panic. Walk slowly and highly carefully into a deeply familiar, completely safe room exactly in your quiet house, such as your highly comfortable bedroom or your main living room, and intentionally turn off every single light switch and completely power down any nearby reading lamp. Sit down deeply securely in a highly sturdy, deeply familiar chair. Firmly keep your aging eyes gently open without any heavy straining, and simply breathe completely calmly for exactly 5 full minutes while your highly sensitive vision slowly begins to safely pick out the dim, heavy shadows strictly in the room. This completely helps support more comfortable, significantly steadier vision by actively and gently preparing your deeply internal photoreceptors exactly when you desperately need them to perfectly function correctly on the highly dark road. 7. The harsh glare correction. Shift your direct, heavy line of visual sight slightly down and strictly toward the deeply solid white line, perfectly painted on the right edge of the dark road exactly whenever an oncoming car quickly approaches you with heavily bright, violently blinding headlights. This highly simple, incredibly protective, and completely free daily driving habit safely prevents the intense, violently bright beams of incoming traffic from directly striking and completely overwhelming the highly sensitive, delicate center of your heavily aging retina. By actively choosing to completely look softly away from the highly dangerous light source, you gently guarantee your delicate night vision completely remains perfectly intact and deeply stable while safely operating your heavy vehicle. I remember a woman named Patricia who was 65 years old, quickly becoming incredibly tense and physically squeezing the heavy steering wheel in sheer, absolute terror, exactly whenever tall trucks with massive, incredibly blinding LED headlights drove completely past her on the highly dark evening highway. She was accidentally making the highly common, deeply dangerous mistake of strictly looking directly into the incredibly bright approaching lights, completely out of sheer, overwhelming anxiety, deeply bleaching her delicate night vision, and completely losing track of her own safe driving lane. We gently taught her to immediately completely shift her tired eyes down to the deeply solid, painted white line securely on the right shoulder, the exact second she clearly saw bright lights safely approaching in the far distant road. She safely maintained her perfect, highly stable lane position without ever completely looking directly into the highly harsh glare, drastically improving her quiet evening driving confidence and completely eliminating her deeply held fear of heavy oncoming traffic. The very center of your incredible human retina, which is strictly and directly responsible for your absolutely sharpest, most highly detailed daytime vision, is completely and totally useless in the dark and incredibly vulnerable to being violently overloaded by sudden, highly intense bursts of bright evening light. When you accidentally, completely stare directly into highly modern, incredibly intense vehicle headlights, you forcefully and terribly bleach the completely surrounding delicate night vision cells, quickly causing a massive, deeply painful blind spot that can stubbornly remain firmly in your direct field of view for several long, highly dangerous seconds. By physically moving your highly central visual focus completely away from the violently harsh, terrible light source and relying safely on your deeply natural peripheral vision to gently track the bright, oncoming vehicle, you actively protect the absolute most sensitive, delicate part of your highly aging eye. Tracking the solid, highly reflective, safely painted road line perfectly anchors your deep visual orientation, safely guiding your car forward, while the blinding, highly overwhelming light safely passes completely out of your direct, vulnerable view, while safely driving completely calmly on a heavily dark, deeply quiet evening road. Exactly the very moment you clearly notice the incredibly bright, highly intense glow of an oncoming vehicle safely approaching entirely from the opposite lane, gently stop completely looking directly straight ahead at the far distant horizon. Intentionally lower your heavy chin slightly and strictly focus your direct, steady gaze deeply on the highly solid, completely reflective white or yellow painted line resting completely and perfectly on the exact right side of your highly specific driving lane until the brightly lit vehicle has fully and completely safely passed by. If you know someone over 50 who could benefit from this, share this video.